Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about the famous Great Firewall of China, which is the chief means of Chinese internet censorship, and we're also going to be talking about a lot of related technologies. So there's been a lot of stories in the news lately about the different techniques the Chinese government is using to censor its citizens. These are just a couple of the headlines from a couple of those articles detailing really the importance and the scope of Chinese internet censorship. So one of the common things about Chinese internet censorship is that when you try to Google something that's controversial, some kind of technology is stepping in to make it so that when you click the link, you would get a blank page. So for instance, if you did a Google search of 1989 Tiananmen Square, you might get a blank page and you couldn't see anything. So the Chinese government employs a whole lot of techniques to keep Chinese internet users from accessing controversial content. All of this content is going to be stuff the Communist Party of China, aka the CCP, thinks is harmful. The techniques they use to block content can be broadly broken down into three categories. There's censorship, which just means the maintenance of a workforce that deletes harmful blogs, posts comments, and adds its own comments to spin the debate. There's also self-censorship, which is more of a psychological thing. It just means that with criminal penalties, companies and individuals will censor themselves so the government doesn't have to do it. And in particular, there's the Great Firewall, which is a combination of systems that prevents users from accessing harmful content in the first place.
The Great Firewall is really just an ironic Western term that connects the Chinese government's blocking of harmful content to the blocking of invaders using the Great Wall of China. The Great Wall is primarily a function of China's internet service providers. There are 8 state-owned telecommunication firms which are legally obligated to follow the CCP's guidelines for restricting internet access. The 3 biggest Chinese state-owned telecommunications firms are China Mobile, China Unicom, and China Telecom. The 3 main methods for denying service and blocking access are IP blocking, DNS hijacking, and keyword content inspection and filtering. Now we will discuss the details of how these firms are able to block access to questionable content. We'll begin with IP blocking. IP blocking is the easiest method for the Chinese government to use, but is also the easiest to get around. All internet traffic contains packets which are sent out over a router. When using IP blocking, the router will automatically look into the packet's destination IP address, and if it matches the source or destination of questionable content, it is blocked. This works because the Chinese government maintains a list of IPs that they deem harmful.
The second method that the Chinese government uses is called DNS hijacking. DNS, or Domain Name System, is the system that the internet uses to match domain names to IP addresses. Whenever you enter a URL in a web browser, the web browser sends a request to the domain name server to find the appropriate IP address. In China, whenever somebody enters a URL that has a banned keyword, the router will hijack the connection and send the users to a different site. The last method the Chinese government uses is similar to DNS hijacking. It is called keyword content inspection and filtering. The Chinese government uses an intrusion detection system to inspect all internet traffic. If the traffic contains any banned keywords, it is suppressed with a TCP connection reset, which prevents the traffic from reaching its destination. Keyword content inspection and filtering is what will be used if the first 2 methods fail to achieve their purpose.
Now we'll talk about the Great Cannon. The Great Cannon can be thought of as an offense mechanism, while the Great Firewall can be thought of as a defense mechanism. The Great Cannon is used to attack websites the Chinese government does not approve of, using a direct denial of service attack. Here's a quote from a Business Insider article about the Great Cannon that explains how the Great Cannon is used for DDoS attacks.
Here's an infographic which displays the 2 systems side by side, in particular, the keyword content inspection and filtering component of the Great Firewall, along with the creation of botnets for a DDoS attack as part of the Great Cannon. When the Great Firewall detects a packet from banned content, it inserts its own packets to tell the connection to reset itself. The Great Cannon, on the other hand, waits for a packet that meets its attack criteria. When that attack criteria is met, the Great Cannon will insert Java code in a new packet and send that back to the originating user. That packet will make the user's computer part of the botnet, which will be used in a distributed denial of service attack on a website that the Chinese government wishes to attack.
A distributed denial of service, or DDoS, attack occurs when an attacker converts many computers into zombie PCs and targets a given server. Websites the Chinese government does not approve of, such as greatfire.org, which contains details of Chinese government censorship, were attacked in recent months. The best way to prevent a DDoS attack is to make sure you browse the web using HTTPS and not HTTP. HTTPS means that you have a secure connection between your computer and the server, and the way you can determine this is if there's a lock symbol where you would type the URL.
So the last thing we'd like to discuss is the common ways that citizens of China get around the internet censorship provided by the Great Firewall. One of the most common methods is virtual private networks. A virtual private network works by creating a secure encrypted tunnel to the appropriate network over the internet through which all of your computer's traffic is going to be sent. A VPN changes what your packets look like and make it much more difficult to determine what's inside them. One of the ways this is accomplished is by disguising where your computer's traffic is actually originating from. So for instance, if you were in China but you used a VPN that was from California, the Chinese filters would only see that a connection from California was going through, and they wouldn't block its access as a result. Over time, the Chinese government has been employing increasingly complex methods in order to counter VPNs, and in response, the internet users in China have been using increasingly complex countermeasures to continue to circumvent the Great Firewall. So that concludes our video, and we hope it has been informative for you. Thank you for listening.